Season 4 of The Dragon Prince came out on November 3rd, and with fans eagerly awaiting the new season after a 3-year hiatus, some concluded by saying it felt underwhelming and empty. A major talking point so far has been the Rayllum ship, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say lack of. So let's talk about the events that led to their separation over the 2-year time skip, how their relationship developed throughout the new season, each of their perspectives, and how I think it should have played out. Oh yeah, I've also hidden 5 pictures of Stella throughout this video, so good luck finding her. Let's go. In case you didn't know, Through the Moon was a canon graphic novel released back in 2020 and depicts the events between the 3rd and 4th seasons. I'll preface by saying it's a great story and you should absolutely read it for yourself, if not just for the beautiful artwork. I'll quickly cover the main parts of the story very briefly so we can move on with season 4, but this book is crucial to what happens in this new season. It starts with Rayla having a nightmare where she's back at the Stormspire and Viren is about to trap her in the ice along with her parents and Runan. She wakes up due to Callum tickling her face with Fifi's feather. Basically, they have to head back to the EmberNexus so Fifi can be reborn. Rayla is still concerned about not finding Viren's body at the bottom of the Stormspire and remains quite doubtful and dislikes it greatly when Callum attempts to soothe her and help her move on, but they still share a cute moment anyway. After the ritual, Lu Jane gives an explanation as to how moon phoenixes are tied to both life and death through the Nexus. Rayla gives thought to going through it herself to see if Viren is really dead. Rayla has another nightmare where she witnesses Viren shatter Callum into pieces, where she immediately wakes up in tears screaming his name. Callum and Rayla convince the others to rebuild the old runes to allow Rayla to enter the Nexus, but they just think it's to restore the location to its former self. Callum casts a spell to open the Nexus before the runes collapse, which in turn alerts Lu Jane and the others. Rayla is already through the portal when she gets there. Her body in the real world floats lifelessly on the surface of the water. Rayla has entered on the night of King Harrow's assassination. She stumbles across a cave, the cave we as the audience know Viren to be in. She sees a large cocoon containing Viren sleeping inside at the very end and pulls out one of her blades. As she steps closer to inspect it, the souls of the fallen soldiers pull her back away from the cocoon and the sleeping Viren suddenly wakes, staring right at her. In the real world, her body threatens to drown. Callum goes in to save her using one of Fifi's feathers to keep him tethered to the living world. They swim back up to the surface and emerge in the real world where they share a hug, Rayla reiterates her hatred of water, and then they kiss. Right, so why did I tell you all that? Later, Rayla tells Callum what she saw and how Viren is still alive. They agree that the next morning they will go out to search for Viren together, except for the fact that Rayla leaves in the night, leaving him with a letter and a kiss on his forehead. So you can understandably, alongside the fact that it's been 2 years, see why Callum was so hurt by this. So what was their relationship in season 4 actually like? Well, shaky would be a nice way to put it, I think. There was a lack of understanding, a lot of conflicting emotions, and just poor communication. We first see Rayla at the very end of episode 2 where she appears in Callum's tower. After Callum decides at the very beginning of the next episode that he doesn't want to talk to her, she asks if she can stay and not talk instead, to which she agrees and she stays up all night. She leaves in the morning and returns at the end of the episode where Ezran seems much happier to see her than Callum, and he runs up giving her a hug.
I'm so sorry that I missed you so much. We all did.
Throughout the rest of the season, Rayla makes attempts to connect with Callum and to speak with him, but he typically refuses indirectly, sticking with one of the other two, Ezran or Soren. A perfect example of this is when they're in the Enchanted Forest, and Rayla suggests that she and Callum go search for the secret entrance to Umber Tor, but Callum shuts that down real fast.
You can't just go off alone.
Okay, fine. Callum and I will go look for the entrance.
No, I'll stay with Ezran. Soren, you go with Rayla. You want an adventure, right?
Oh, yeah. I suppose that works too.
In the final act of the season, we see them get a bit closer, but that's only once Callum thinks Rayla's died and he's ultimately lost her forever. From Callum's perspective, Rayla straight up lied to his face about going to look for Viren together, and completely abandoned him along with everyone else there at the Moon Nexus. To say that both of them were aware of the dangers or the potential time sink it could be, I think would be an understatement. Just like how under 3% of you are subscribed. Please do consider it though if you're enjoying the video. Callum was left with a letter, the contents still unknown to us, and that was about it really. To constantly be thinking whether she was dead or alive for the next 2 years would be super mentally draining. Sticking to what did happen for now as I'm saving what I thought should have happened for later.
You still love her, don't you?
He lacks such feelings when actually seeing her, almost brushing her off like she's nothing even though the night before he was crying about her. This then leads to him being convinced she can stay as long as she doesn't talk.
Would it be okay maybe if I stay and we just don't talk?
Which I get to some extent. Having someone leave you the way she did probably doesn't put you in the best mood when they turn up 2 years later so casually. But I don't really know how else she could have arrived. Callum understandably is going through a lot of emotions, and it finally catches up with him after he dismisses her passively again and again after she says she didn't find Viren.
Oh, so you disappeared for 2 years for no reason at all. Maybe.
Callum does know how much pain Viren's brought upon her through her parents and Runan, and he knows how important it is to her to find Viren so he can't cause any more suffering. He snaps after she tells him this because thinking irrationally, it means that she disappeared for no reason.
I know my leaving hurt you.
And she, as shown the Through the Moon book, knew of this beforehand. This forces Callum, not in a bad way mind you, to face the reality of what he's been feeling and actually let down some of his defenses to the person we know he still cares so much about. He reinforces that he's not up for talking at the moment because, well, he'd probably break down to tears if we're being honest. Jumping towards the very end of the season when Callum lets Rayla chase down Viren after they see him alive.
Viren is alive. I have to go after him.
I know.
Demonstrates he does understand how important this is to her, and I think it reminds him of the reason she left without all of his feelings getting in between to cloud his judgment. After the rest of them escape back through the front entrance and Zubair and Rex have their standoff, Callum notices one of her blades, which means she must have come back behind them. This scene recognizes Callum's built up emotions over the last 2 years and lets him be vulnerable, holding on to the last thing he has of her while the grief and anguish draws out more and more of the despair he's been keeping away from everyone else, and perhaps even himself. And while Soren and Ezra weren't shown to be affected to the same degree Callum was by Rayla's leaving, they've also lost a close friend. After Rayla shouts out for some help from under some rocks, he first comforts her by resting his hand on her shoulder as she catches her breath before smiling, showing us and her his forgiveness, then giving her a hug, to which she seems pleasantly surprised about, reciprocating shortly after. So I think it's clear that Callum did care all along, I mean, obviously, but was too uptight in himself to actually admit it and allow himself to show it to others in a way that would constructively help him work through it.
Okay.
Or with Rayla to help mend their relationship faster. So as mentioned, the end of Through the Moon has Rayla leaving the EmberNexus to go in search of Viren alone. Throughout the novel, she's shown having recurring nightmares that are having a great effect on her mental health, from the added stress of living through horrific events over and over, to the lack of sleep she gets from staying up due to her anxiety. Rayla in Season 3 was the first one to display her feelings, and it's evident that Callum and the others mean a lot to her, especially now after
I've lost everything. My parents, the people who cared about me, my home. There's nowhere I belong now.
I understand that this is tough for Callum, but he does have a support group. Rayla didn't, and yes, she chose to leave, but in my opinion, it makes it all the more clear how important seeing Viren dead is to her, which is something Callum eventually realizes in episode 9. After returning back to the castle to see her friends for the first time in 2 years, I think Callum could have been a bit happier to see her. It shows immense bravery that she could bring herself back after knowing what she did to all of them, and how she didn't really have anything to show for it. Having Callum completely shut her down after all that stress is probably pretty breaking. He's incredibly dismissive of her and almost comes across as arrogant. When he says he's going to bed, she understandably reacts with bewilderment.
You know what? I have a long day tomorrow. I should go to bed.
Wait, what? We haven't seen each other in 2 years. Don't you think it's worth staying up a little past your bedtime?
I'm tired.
Because like I've said, it's been 2 years and his reaction is beyond underwhelming. This entire scene to me came as a massive shock as to how contemptuous he was acting. Rayla the following morning admits to him, but mainly herself, that
We had something so special. But I became so obsessed with revenge that I risked losing the best thing I ever had. You.
which shows incredible growth in recognizing something so grand in her life, and shows that she thought a lot about it while she was away. After being almost entirely dismissed by Callum, I'm still impressed that she had the confidence to go see Ezra, and this was much more the reaction I was thinking. You can see her nerves and insecurities fade while Ezra embraces her, accepting her, and saying how much not just him, but how everyone missed her.
I missed you so much. We all did.
Which is a subtle reassurance to the fact that Callum did miss her. You can say whatever you want about her not apologizing directly, as many people correctly pointed out in my last video.
She's an orphan. Or she was, but now she's got a cuddle mama.
But you'd be hard pressed to say that she didn't put in effort. There was a number of times she tried reaching out to connect with him, and he either gave nothing or straight up dismissed her. And before all of you say something vaguely relevant to that without actually addressing my point, myself and I'm sure many of you are aware of the fact that of course their dynamic was going to be different. But again, just look at the end of episode 2 or the start of 3. She literally just wanted to talk. That's all.
Fine. What do you want to talk about?
I just anything, really. I'm so happy to see you again, Callum.
In a similar vein to that, I can see some of you going, she could have done anything to let him know she was alive. A letter or something perhaps. But honestly, I'm with Rayla on this one. Sending back a message would only further emphasize the fact that she's still alive and hasn't come back. It would be incredibly demanding on Callum's emotions to know for sure one way or the other, as shown here. As I mentioned when talking from Callum's perspective, it's clear that he was quote-unquote warming up throughout the season. So when an opportunity like this happens...
Oh, nice. Moon ones are the prettiest.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the opals.
I expect he'd actually take it. This probably isn't anything more for Rayla other than some hurt ego, but by this point we already know that he's just about ready to talk to her alone. So why would he not just leave it when she's looking at him all cutesy-like? Rayla and Callum staying behind after they both witness Viren picking up his staff shows that they're in this together now, and the fact that she stays until he acknowledges that she needs to go after them really shows true strength and growth in Callum. To Rayla, it's finally a relief that he's with her on something again. And finally, one of the most symbolic shots in this season. So you know how Rayla's always been the one extending herself, trying to reach out to Callum, and he's just dismissed her?
Callum and I will go look for the entrance.
He for once this season actually makes an effort the other way around, by physically reaching out to her and showing his care and support of her, a gentle smile of affection and acceptance. And finally, our real Rayllum scene of season 4, their hug. So, I've told you what happened in the season, and I kind of dug into each of them a bit, but there's no point in me telling you a problem if I can't at least offer something to fix it. I mentioned this briefly in my general season 4 review / analysis, but I think having Callum and Rayla share a hug at the beginning would have been so much better, similar to with Soren. It makes sense that he and or all of them would have missed her, so why wouldn't you? After the adrenaline and oxytocin has died down a bit and the initial shock of her finally being there has left, then you can move more into the concealed feelings that have been kept hidden away all this time. I'm not saying he should lash out afterwards, but more the strength he was upkeeping as a facade can shatter, and he can allow himself to be vulnerable in front of her, and show what her leaving truly did to him. The rest of the season can progress similar to how it actually did in the show, but maybe with some more consideration behind both of their actions. When Rayla suggests that her and Callum should go together to look for the entrance, then he should go instead of making Soren. That way they can have another chat about where the other person's at, and they can end their search for the entrance with a hug before heading back or whatever else. This then makes it feel more natural when Callum wakes Rayla in the third zone of peril, as they've already spoken on good terms beforehand, and it doesn't sound totally crazy when Callum's first actual words to her in 2 years are,
I need you to kill me.
What?
I need you to kill me.
Because my storyline has them slightly further along due to there not being quote-unquote unnecessary conflict between the two of them, I could go either way with one of them giving a quick kiss to the other at the end along with the hug, but more like a kiss on the cheek or forehead. Anything more than that, I think it's moving far too quickly for what's happened. Do I think Wonderstorm could have handled Rayla and Callum's relationship better? Yeah, I do. And I was a little surprised to have it feel slightly out of place for both of their characters, particularly Callum. But I didn't have any major problems with it either, I really just wanted to find out what they did next. Did you find all 5 of the Stellas I hid? There's timestamps in the description if you'd like to go back and check. I really hope you like the Dragon Prince content I've been doing recently. Please let me know if you'd like to see more, and what specifically I should talk about. Themes or bigger scenes are normally pretty good suggestions. Thank you for watching until the end, and please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you've made it this far. Until next time.